This episode is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is the hosting provider I use for devchat.tv. I also use it for my applications that manage the RSS feeds, scheduling, and sponsorships involved in delivering these shows. DigitalOcean is easy to use, has data centers all over the world, and provides terrific services including server hosting and object storage for delivering your web applications and assets quickly and easily. I use DigitalOcean because I love their interface. I get SSD storage for my servers, and their support replies quickly. So go check them out at digitalocean.com. Hey everybody, and welcome to another My JavaScript Story. This week we're talking to Fred Zirdung. I hope I said that something close to correct.
Yep, you got it right. Said Fred Zirdung.
Now, you were on Ep 76 of JavaScript Jabber, which was quite a long time ago, talking about Meteor.js, which that whole movement has undergone some changes as well, the whole Meteor.
Yeah.
But, anyway, we got you on to talk about what you're doing and how you got into coding and all of that stuff. Do you want to just give a brief introduction before we get too far into that, though?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just see. We'll start from now and I'll work my way backwards a little bit. Well, currently, I am head of curriculum at Hack Reactor, one of the coding schools here in San Francisco. I essentially build all the tools and learning materials for the students as they go through our class. I'm also the lead instructor here, so I do a lot of the teaching as well, primarily lecturing, but I also visit students in the computer lab, station to station, and see how they're reacting to some of the new curriculum that I launch. I've been here about 5 years. I haven't been teaching the whole time, but the majority of the time that I have been the teacher. And prior to that, I worked at a number of companies, both small and large. The largest company that I worked at was Walmart Labs. As you know, Walmart is one of the biggest companies in the world, 2.2 million employees. So it's an interesting place to work. And I've worked at tiny startups where I was employee number 5. So I had my fair share of experiences. It's been a fun time.
Awesome. Now, when you worked for Walmart, did you work in Arkansas or?
I worked here in California in the San Bruno office.
Okay. I just didn't know where they were all set up at. So
yeah, Walmart Labs was actually an acquisition from Bay Area company that then got integrated into the rest of Walmart.com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump in the Wayback Machine and talk about how you got into coding.
Okay. Sounds fun. I have been coding professionally now for, I would say, I guess if you start post college, I don't want to date myself too much, but I guess I've been programming for about 20 years now, a little over 20 years professionally. And then, I graduated college around 24, 25. And so prior to that, I've been coding also for probably 10 years prior to that on a regular basis. And then prior to that, I dabbled in it. So I started coding, my first introduction to programming was with the Logo programming language in sixth grade. That's when I got into it. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, I remember that. The little turtle.
Yeah, the little turtle on these computers, these ancient computers. They were called, I think the operating system was called QNX, and they had little monochrome screens and little click keyboards. And I'd sit there after class and make the turtle draw all kinds of things. And I remember having this little notebook where I would write out my programs that I designs
nice.
that I come up with. Yeah,
That's
wish
awesome.
I still had that notepad.
So was programming then something that you always knew you were interested in, or is it something that you came back around to later on?
Well, in the early days, I was always interested in computers. My dad got me interested in computers. Back then, computers weren't so prolific. They were more of a luxury item that only few people had in their homes. And in fact, the main computers that existed back then were things like the Atari 2600 and I don't know if you remember the Intellivision. That was like the other alternative game console. It was kind of like the nerdy game console, the one that the Atari was sort of like the mainstream one that everyone had, and the Intellivision was a little more featureful, more sophisticated games, but it was like the beta of the VCR world, right? The Betamax.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah, so it was but it was a general purpose computer. You could do all kinds of stuff on it, but nobody really used it for anything other than games. And eventually it died out. And then there were some other computers that sort of existed back then, Tandy, and then a couple of other ones. So it was not that common for people to have computers. And then My friends had them. A few. Commodore 64 was another one that was really popular, and I think that was another one where I tried to get into programming, but going from Logo to assembly language is like a big jump.
Yeah.
And I just didn't get it. I couldn't wrap my head around it, and so I kind of lost interest in them for a little while. And then in high school, I got back into it using basic programming language, and that's when I really dove into it and really got into basic programming. And then so I went into basic programming, but then it didn't really click for me. Programming didn't really click for me until in like high school. Probably, I think when I was 16 or 17, I happened to take this electronics class on computer, and one of the modules was electronics and how computers worked. And they had these little tiny, super simple computers, and I learned assembly language on it. It had literally 25 instructions, and that's when it all clicked. I finally got it. I finally really understood what it meant to program a computer, and that's when I was hooked. At that point, I was like totally hooked on it.
Yeah, it's interesting because your experience parallels mine in a lot of ways. I think you're a little bit older than I am, but not a lot older than I am. But yeah, I was doing Logo in school. I kind of played with it. I didn't do a whole lot of basic, but when I got into high school, the web was starting to get big. This was in the mid to late 90s. And I took an electronics class, and we were actually putting the bytecodes in on pins on the side of the 8088 chip. And it was like, oh, that's how that works, and I need the values out of that register, and it's like, okay, I see what it's doing, and
getting into the microarchitecture of the CPU is what really helped me understand how computers work, and understanding registers and the program counter and the stack and the and memory and fetching and all that other stuff was really great. Yeah, for me, the web started to become a thing in early 90s. I was in college at that time when the web first came out, and I remember the Mosaic web browser was the I don't know if you remember that one. It crashed all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember running on a Sun Microsystems Spark workstation. That's what we had. That's what we had in college.
Yep. Oh, the good old days. So, so in college, were you doing software then too? Were you a computer science major or something else?
A little. I did not go into computer science. I actually did a computer engineering degree, which is essentially a double E with emphasis on computers. So instead of doing all the sort of like power and RF stuff, I did software and computer architecture, and that's really another moment in time that really got me solidified on the sort of computer front.
Yeah, I have a computer engineering degree as well. So, I remember, designing chips and writing VSDL and all kinds of stuff.
For a while there, I kind of thought maybe chip design was my thing, and I did a little bit of it in college. And so I went to a school called University of Waterloo in Canada, and it's a unique program. It's not so unique anymore. There's a lot of copycat programs that are like it, but it alternated between a semester of school and a semester of work, and it was a requirement of the program that you had to do these work terms. Like you couldn't just not do them. You couldn't graduate without a minimum of 5 work terms. So what happens though is when you graduate, you've got essentially what amounts to 2 years of work experience, which gives you a leg up in the job market. People want to hire people with work experience, not straight out of college with no work experience. So from that perspective, it was great. And the school has a very streamlined process where they have they have a very regimented process where they have to have job postings by a certain date, and then there's interviews, and then they have matches and all this stuff. And the way I ended up in California is that I ended up working for a chip company. I thought that's what I wanted to do. I went to work for Cypress Semiconductor and on 2 internships while I was here, and I just fell in love with California and ended up moving back here to take a software job when I graduated from college.
So what was it that appealed to you about software over hardware then?
Oh, yeah, the hardware was cool to be so the thing that appealed to me about hardware was working with these tiny, transistors that were so small that you can't even imagine how small they are. But when it came down to it, I started working with actual chips, doing testing and debugging, and it was so frustrating that if you found a bug that was like a showstopper bug, that was it for that whole line of testing that you had to do. You had to wait till the next one was fabricated for you, which when in chip design is like a 3-week process to get another one fabricated, and it's not cheap. Like, you have to test it exhaustively and find all the bugs, fix all the bugs that you can find, and then you can do a Rev 2, which might end up being like a 6-month cycle of like finding bugs until you get the next version, and then you got to do it all over again. And maybe after about a year of testing and debugging, you finally have a working chip. And this is true even on board level circuitry when you're doing, you do simulations and whatnot, and you try and get your simulations right. But ultimately, the real hardware is what tells you whether it's working or not. And I just did not, that long 6-month cycle was not satisfying for me. I needed more immediate feedback to be satisfied with my work. So I turned my attention back to software. And initially I did embedded systems software, which itself was kept my interest for a while. It was cool to be able to manipulate hardware and bits and do all that kind of fun stuff. But the web is really what sparked my creativity and sort of like drive for software. I really loved software once I discovered web programming. Nice.
How did you get into web programming?
So I was working at a company called Dolby Laboratories, the sound company at the time. They were the company that I came to work for straight out of college. And when I first started working for them, I was doing embedded software on one of their flagship products. And they were trying to get into new business spaces, and they had adopted a new platform that was web-centric and Linux-based. Instead of using these proprietary OSs, we started moving to open-source Linux. And some of my early web programming was all done in Java. And even then, I was like, even with Java, I was like pretty fascinated with it. But then once I got into the more open-source technologies that are prolific today, that's when I really started to love web programming.
Gotcha. So what technologies really kind of lit you up? I'm assuming some of it was in JavaScript.
Yep, JavaScript. So I started working in JavaScript a little late. So my first foray into web was Java based, and then I did a little of, surprisingly, people find it surprising, I did a little bit of like Perl as well in there in the early days. And then I learned I didn't like Perl. I like the language, and I like what it does for you. But every single time you open a Perl file, you never know what you wrote. You got to relearn everything. So Ruby on Rails was kind of where things took off for me. But I was part of the version 1 of the Ruby on Rails phenomenon.
Oh wow, you were in it before I was.
Really?
Yeah, I got in version 1.2, I think.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, it was somewhere in the version 1 dot something range. It might have been 1.2. I don't remember. But it was definitely in the very early stages.
Yep. Very cool. So what was it then that appealed to you about like Ruby on Rails and JavaScript and some of these systems that were out there? Was it just the flexibility? Was it the programming paradigm? Were there other things?
The programming paradigm was one aspect of it. Definitely. Also, the flexibility. I had just found that prior to that, there was just a lot of boilerplate code that you had to write to get anything done. And I appreciate a lot of the high level, like where we've come so far with frameworks and languages. Right. I mean, in high school, I learned how to program in C before, that was my second language after basic. And I remember just how much you had to do to get even a tiny bit accomplished in C. And now in JavaScript, when you write so much, you can get so much done with just a few lines of code. It's amazing. And so Ruby was that sort of first. I got a taste of it with Java because Java was a higher level language, but it was still do a lot of stuff. It's a very verbose language. But then once you got to Ruby, it was so elegant and easy to read, and the standard libraries that came with the language, there was just so much already done for you. You just string it together and you can get tons of work done. I finally felt like I found something that I could be productive with.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what have you done in JavaScript that you're particularly proud of?
Let's see. I mean, I built a lot of stuff in JavaScript. Like I said, I got to the JavaScript world a little late. I think I started programming in JavaScript in 2000 and I want to say 2009. That's when I first got into it. Yeah, that's about there. And then I really, I'm going to downplay my JavaScript skills. I think initially I wasn't very good at it, but based on now when I look back at some of my old code, it actually doesn't look too bad. I'm still kind of impressed with that I had figured out some of the stuff that I had figured out. But yeah, I started programming JavaScript. I built one of the startups that I worked at. It was this little startup called Siftio, and they had these little interactive game cubes. They had a TED Talk back in 2008 about it, and that's what drew me to the company. And it was a really interesting product. Had a lot of great applications for learning and for especially for children with autism and other special needs. And that was I kind of wanted to do something a little more meaningful with my life than work in Dolby was like, I would say, the entertainment space, you know. And so I went to work there, and a couple other companies that I worked prior to that were all in the entertainment space. I wanted to do something a little more meaningful. So there, when I worked there, I built a lot of their web front end in JavaScript. Much of it was built in JavaScript on the front end and Ruby on Rails on the back end. And at that time, MVC frameworks for JavaScript were just starting out. I think Backbone was the main one. There was also what was it called? Is it called Spine? Not Spine. I can't remember the name of it now.
I think Spine was built on top of Backbone. There was Knockout.
Knockout was the other one I'm thinking of, yeah.
Yep. And, you know, right around that same time, I mean, we had you on to talk about Meteor.
Meteor, yep.
So.
That was coming into focus then. That was a little bit later, I think. But yeah, like by the time Meteor came out, there was Angular was starting to become prolific as well. Yeah. React wasn't yet on the scene. So,
yeah. Well, what are you working on now?
What I'm working on now, so I mean, I've been at Hack Reactor for 5 years. I've been teaching here for 4 of those 5 years, and I've been head of curriculum for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years of that time. And I'm really just trying to figure out how to teach people effectively. There's these meta patterns that occur with teaching people how to program that. You know, every single time I do it, I get a little bit better at it. But there are mental blocks that people have around learning concepts in JavaScript that are just challenging, and I find those really fascinating. I find the human brain an extremely interesting thing, and I'm really just JavaScript and programming is really just the medium by which I'm discovering how people's brains work, and that's what I love about it the most. It's a fun language because it's unlike Ruby, which I also love. I still use Ruby a lot. I generally tend to use Ruby for writing command line utilities. But JavaScript, what I love about JavaScript is that it doesn't have as much built into the language as Ruby does. And so it forces people to really engage with the core concepts of programming.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you design a curriculum that works well in JavaScript?
That's a great question. It's one of the biggest things that I think you need to keep your focus on is like, what is your objective? And in order to understand what your objective is, you also have to have the best word that I can use to describe it is the curriculum arc, but there's more of a learning arc. Like you have to understand what sequence to tell people things about. So one of the things that I feel is lacking in much of the material that's out there on the internet for learning how to program is that they teach most tutorials are topical based, and the topics are ordered in a very general sort of like, we're going to learn about this thing, and we're going to learn about this thing, and then we're going to learn about this thing, with not a lot of thought put into the progression of those things. And sometimes, like for example, objects and arrays and functions are like building blocks to the JavaScript programming language, and they're building blocks to most high level languages, in fact. And they're taught as isolated modules in some sequence, and in reality, they're very interrelated. And if you break them down into smaller pieces and weave them in just the right way, you can actually get a more effective outcome than if you teach them in isolation from each other in sequence. Like, here's everything that you need to know about functions, and then here's everything that you need to know about objects, right? But if you somehow broke it down into small little pieces, here's a tiny piece of an object, a factoid that you need to know, and here's a function, and here's a little factoid, and together these two things solve this problem. By showing people how it solves particular problems, I think you get a deeper learning. Like your neural pathways are more solidified by showing people a concept that solves a problem, as opposed to showing them a thing that they need to memorize as a fact.
Right.
And so I think a lot of the tutorials out there are more fact-based. Here are all the factoids that you need to know about objects in order to use them effectively. Please learn them. And we'll give you some exercises to reinforce them, but those exercises are just pointless. They are there to help you memorize. They don't actually help you solve real problems that you would encounter, and which is what programming languages are. They're designed to help us solve problems, right?
Right. Yeah, they're based more on concepts than actual practices, I guess.
Yeah. So I generally try and structure my curriculum around where we're aiming to solve a particular problem, and or learn a particular technique through solving a problem. Sometimes I try not to use problems that are too contrived, because when they're contrived, again, it's like, why would I ever do this, is the question that pops up with students who are new, So I try to avoid those scenarios.
Yeah, I hear you there. It was funny because the reason I wound up being a computer engineering major instead of a computer science major, and I was actually going to go into IT and not do programming, was because all of the exercises we did in college were all so contrived that I was just like, yeah, programming is kind of a joke. And I wound up running into a real problem I could solve later on, and that's where it was, oh, I get this. I see where this is helpful. I see where this applies. This is kind of cool and kind of fun, and oh, look, I won because this problem's no longer a problem. Right. So, yeah, personal productivity is another area where I think that programming really helps people become better at it. Like, if you can do your job more effectively and do it faster, then most people want that. Most people want to spend less time working on rudimentary and mundane tasks, and more time working on creative, fun aspects of their job. Yep, absolutely.
And there's no shortage of those kinds of tasks when it comes to programming.
It is so true. And I've been trying to just find ways to automate my own stuff and, just get that off my plate. And so I definitely see that appeal as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do I go solve the hard problems that give me the payoff instead of the, doing the monkeying around or the boilerplate stuff that doesn't give me the payoff that I'm looking for?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, before we get to picks, my next question is, if people want to see what you're doing these days, are you on Twitter? Do you have a blog, GitHub? Where do they go?
Yeah. I Twitter is my primary place where I post interesting stuff about what I do every day and sort of like interesting discoveries that I make along the way. Yeah. Follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is just my name, Fred Zirdung.
Awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and do some picks. Do you have some things you want to shout out about? Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says "Pay me now." And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter DevChat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
Yeah, just recently, let me pull up the name of it. It's called Navalia. It's essentially a scripting tool for Chrome. It lets you do almost anything you want in Chrome. It's primarily used for end-to-end testing, one of its main use cases is for end-to-end testing, but you can do all sorts of fun stuff with it. Essentially, scrape websites that are super JavaScript heavy because it's using real Chrome. It opens up Chrome and lets you script Chrome, so you can do things like find an element on the page, put focus on it, then type some stuff into it, push some buttons. It's great for testing. You can do screenshots with it. It essentially opens up an entire API for Chrome and lets you script the actions inside Chrome. And itself is a programming language that is based on async await as well, which is probably my next pick. My new favorite tech stack is, on the server side is Koa, which isn't that new. People have been using it now for a while. But what I love about it is that it has native async await support, which is the latest and greatest ES7 feature that I'm really into. It makes for writing JavaScript code there's no more, promises are cool. Promises got us out of callback hell, but promises look very sequential, and the syntax gets in the way. Like there's a lot of structural aspects that you need to follow. It looks sequential, but you always have these then functions that are just getting in the way of your code. What I love about async await is that it's literally one keyword and you put the expression behind it, and that thing becomes the asynchronous thing that you're waiting for. And so your code looks extremely synchronous, even though it's not synchronous at all. Right. Yeah. So I'd say that's my pick number 2. I'd say the other pick that I'm really into is, I'm a big fan of React, but Vue is my new favorite front-end framework. And one of the things that I love about it is that it embraces observables, which is another ES7 feature that I'm really excited about. It doesn't come with native built-in observable support, but it has an official plugin that gives you observables behavior all built into the framework.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm going to shout out about a couple of things here myself. So one of the things that I found, I've been learning React, and I'm probably going to be learning Vue here over the next little while, because we started 2 new shows. One's on React and one's on Vue. Go figure. Mm-hmm. So the React developer tools for Chrome is just a plugin. It's really great. I'm really liking that, just to help me figure out what's going on with React. So yeah, I'm going to pick that. Pluralsight has also been a really great resource for learning React. And so I'm going to shout out about them. And anyway, just a lot of cool stuff out there with a lot of these frameworks. I've looked at Vue. It kind of reminds me of somewhere between Angular 1 and React.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know exactly how to pinpoint it more than that, but it has a lot of the simplicity that both of those have, and just enough of the opinions to make it nice to use. So anyway, it's been kind of fun to just look at it while I'm coming up to speed on React. So yeah, so we've got those going, and the shows are React Roundup, and you can go to reactroundup.com and viewsonvue.com. Now we're recording before the first episode actually launches. They'll come out 2 weeks from when we record this, but this episode is scheduled to come out in like 3 months. So, folks, definitely be aware. They're out. There are a number of episodes available. So if you're interested in either of those, go check them out.
That's great. What was the website again for the Vue?
Views on Vue.
Awesome.
And that's just
great.
Yeah, just conversations about Vue. One other thing I guess I should shout out about one of my co-hosts on JavaScript Jabber and on Views on Vue, Joe Eames. He's also on Adventures in Angular. Anyway, he's putting together with a few other people the Framework Summit. And so if you're interested in JavaScript frameworks, this one's going to be kind of general purpose plus some framework-specific sessions. And we talked a lot about it on Adventures in Angular. We're probably going to do an episode on it on JavaScript Jabber. So if you're interested in sort of the wider world of frameworks, or you're looking to try different things, different ways, I highly recommend you check out that conference as well. And it'll be in Park City, Utah, which is up where they have like the Sundance Film Festival and things like that. So It's also where the Olympic team does their training on the off season. So anyway,
sounds fantastic.
Yeah,
sounds fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you, Fred, for joining me on this show. And if people are looking to get into code, do you want to give an elevator pitch for Hack Reactor or?
Yeah, we are a 13-week program based here in San Francisco. It's an intense program. It's 6 days a week, 11 hours a day. It's pretty intensive. Plus, there's about 3 to 6 weeks of pre-course that you need to do, and then we have a new postgraduate program as well that's helping people with some specific job readiness skills. So the combination between those it's about 24 weeks of your life, and it's one of the most amazing 24 weeks of your life that you will ever experience. People come out of here, change people, and it's one of the things that I love about my job is the rewarding aspect of it. We're changing lives on a daily basis, helping them transition to new careers or reignite their existing software careers. It's a really great place to be. So
yeah, and there's a huge demand for software developers anyway. So yeah,
there is. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been super fun chatting.
Yeah, you too. We'll definitely have to follow up, see about getting you on JavaScript Jabber or something.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep. Talk to you later.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.